But first up, President Biden is in France to mark 80 years since D-Day. He'll meet World War II veterans, attend a state dinner hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron, and discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe traveling with the president and joins us now from Paris. Ed, quite an assignment. It's not Lower Manhattan's criminal court. How is it over there, and what's on the agenda for the president beyond visiting Normandy?
Well, Bob, good evening. The president wrapping up what was a full day of closed-door prep, in essence, for the next 4 days. As you mentioned, there's the Normandy anniversary tomorrow. There's a speech he's giving on Friday that's designed to be a major address about his concerns about the future of democracy, not just in the United States, but across Europe and around the world, similar to the themes once expressed by former President Ronald Reagan in a speech he gave 40 years ago at the same spot where Biden will speak on Friday. Saturday, as you mentioned, is the big state visit for the president. He'll get the full French military honors with a parade in the streets of Paris, followed by meetings with President Macron, a state dinner, and then Sunday, in what I think you and I would agree is probably one of the more intriguing moments of this trip, he's going to go to a French-American military cemetery where soldiers and Marines who died during World War I, American soldiers and Marines, are buried. This was a spot that back in 2018, former President Trump was scheduled to visit, but had to postpone the trip due to bad weather and concerns about taking a 50-mile motorcade up there. But it was later revealed that he called those buried at that location losers and suckers, something the former president strongly still denies, but that the current president, as a candidate, seized upon as an example of why Trump couldn't be taken seriously on matters of national security, military, and veterans affairs, and something that's, in essence, stuck in the craw of the president ever since. So by going to this place, not explicitly calling out the former president while he's there, at least that's not what is expected to happen, but by going at all, it's yet another opportunity for him, and this time on the world stage, to contrast himself with his likely opponent.
There is nothing more powerful, perhaps, than visiting some of these cemeteries abroad. I remember I went to a U.S. cemetery, military cemetery once in Cambridge, England, and it's just so moving to think about World War II and the joint sacrifice of all of those involved in the effort. And while the president's focused on remembering 80 years on those who were on the beaches, what else is really looming over this trip, Ed, when you talk to White House sources, especially when it comes to dealing with Europeans and their view of what's going on with Ukraine and with Israel?
Let's start with the Middle East. There is general agreement between the United States and France over how that war needs to be ended, but there's a specific difference when it comes to the International Criminal Court. France is a major supporter and benefactor of it, and of course it recently issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and leaders of Hamas. We spoke before the trip began with the French ambassador to the United States, Laurent Bili, about those differences. Take a listen to what he had to say. Is it fair to say the United States and France are on different pages when it comes to the conflict in Gaza?
Not really. Opposition is a bit more subtle than that. That in principle we support the ICC, but we said that we were examining the case. We didn't say that we were supporting the due decision. It's more a general principle that we know that we need ICC, and if we want ICC to be competent when it comes to Russia, we can't just pick and choose when the ICC have got a role to play. On the main elements of the conflict, I think we can say that we agree, like strong condemnation of the terrorist attack, the right of Israel to self-defense. But also the importance for Israel to respect the international law. When we have differences, it's more on the path, but because I think also that on the end game, we also think that we need a two-state solution, that without a two-state solution, the history will repeat itself.
You, like the president here, says you support a two-state solution. Some other European countries have gone so far now as to recognize a Palestinian state. Is France going to go that far?
We have had a very strong debate on the issue. We think that it's something that should happen, but we want also that decision to happen in a moment where it helps the process. And after full consideration, we think that it was probably not the right moment to do it, because we wanted that recognition to be part of a process and achieve some results.
More urgently, perhaps here in Europe, of course, is the war in Ukraine. Again, general agreement between the United States, France, and NATO allies that the war needs to be ended, that Russia needs to end its assault on Ukraine. But France has recently suggested it's willing to go farther than other NATO partners and would consider sending French troops into Ukraine to help defend against Russia. I asked the ambassador what that might look like and whether that puts its relationship with NATO and the United States at risk.
I think the most important was the message behind it, that it was we are going to support Ukraine as long as it takes, and we don't see a situation where Russia winning can be a loss for all of us. And so that was somehow reinserting a part of strategic ambiguity, so as how far we are ready to go, just to make sure that the other side understand that it's not going to be an easy journey.
And you would do that outside of NATO, potentially?
These kind of decisions are national decisions, and that's a sovereign decision that we will take.
It dawns on me, the President is going to Europe, where Ukraine is always on the mind, whereas here in the United States, that war, that story, really has fallen off the front pages and out of the consciousness of many Americans. What do they need to know about what is going on right now and how worried Europe remains about what could happen?
Well, I think the situation is tough, and one of the reasons is also our delay to provide the necessary support to Ukraine. And I think in 1984, Ronald Reagan made an impressive speech in Pointe du Hoc, and recalling that to think that we are in isolation of the rest of the world usually doesn't work. And what is at stake in Europe, in Ukraine, is much more than like some would like to portray it, a regional issue. It's a much more systemic challenge to what we have been trying to build since World War II. And a first conventional war in Europe of that scale, it's something that matters, that's something that is observed, that's probably something that has been encouraging other players in their reckless actions and may encourage others. So I think we have to think globally of what is at stake, and the ceremony in Normandy are probably a good moment for that thinking.
So the future of the war in Ukraine, the future of the conflict in the Middle East, climate change, how to deal with China, the future of democracy on this continent and around the world, some really big issues for the two leaders to discuss in the coming days, Bob.
A lot of important issues, but special for you to also cover the anniversary 80 years after D-Day. Ed O'Keefe, thank you for your reporting, as always.